You are arrested for one count of second-degree murder.
And when them haters start hating on you, just laugh at them all the way to the bank.
And you know the queen been lit, and you know the queen been intelligent, and you know the queen been hard, and that's what it's gonna be all year long.
A rising female rapper, beaten to the ground by two men in the heart of Miami's artistic district, reaches for her gun and makes a split-second decision that will change her life forever. But was it self-defense or cold-blooded murder? The answer to that question has left the Miami music scene in absolute shock, and what you're about to discover will make you question everything about how far someone should go when fighting for their life. This is the story of Kevani Hicks, known in the rap world simply as Kevani. Kevani Hicks wasn't just another aspiring artist trying to make it in the music business. According to public records on Sunbiz, she was actually listed as a manager of a recording studio called Pretty Thug Music, showing that she was actively involved in the business side of the industry as well. This detail is crucial because it paints a picture of someone who wasn't just naive or inexperienced. She was a woman who understood the music business from multiple angles and was working to build something substantial for herself and potentially other artists in the Miami area. She had ambitions, she had talent, and she had the drive to make things happen in an industry that's notoriously difficult for women to navigate, especially women trying to establish themselves in the male-dominated world of rap music. But on that Monday morning around 1:30 a.m., all of those dreams and ambitions came crashing down when police received a shot spotter alert on Northwest 2nd Avenue near Wynwood Walls. For those unfamiliar with this technology, ShotSpotter systems use acoustic sensors to detect and locate gunfire in real time, allowing law enforcement to respond more quickly to shooting incidents. The fact that this system was triggered tells us that multiple shots were fired that night, and what police discovered when they arrived at the scene was scary.
We know that based on her statement that the victim in this case, is her manager, and she says that she's a singer.
Yes, you heard that correctly. The man who ended up dead that night wasn't a random stranger or some enemy from Hicks's past. He was her manager, the person who was supposed to be guiding her career, helping her navigate the treacherous waters of the music industry, and looking out for her best interests as an artist. According to witness statements and surveillance video that police reviewed, though this footage has not been publicly released, Kevani Hicks and the driver of a white Lexus got out of the vehicle and were clearly in a heated argument. The tension between them was visible, the anger was palpable, and what happened next would set off a chain of events that nobody could take back.
Hicks and the driver of a white Lexus got out of the car and were visibly upset and began arguing. First, the driver hit Hicks, throwing her to the ground, and then the alleged victim, her manager, also gets out of the car and beats her.
A woman standing on a Miami street in the middle of the night is first struck by one man with such force that she's thrown to the ground, and then while she's down, her own manager, the man she trusted with her career, gets out of the car and proceeds to beat her as well. The arrest form makes it crystal clear what happened. Miss Hicks was being attacked by two men and was essentially pummeled to the ground. This wasn't a fair fight. This wasn't even a fight at all. It was an assault, plain and simple. Two grown men physically attacking a woman, throwing her down, beating her while she was vulnerable and defenseless. In that moment, Kevani Hicks must have felt absolutely terrified, completely overwhelmed, and desperately searching for any way to protect herself from what she clearly perceived as a life-threatening situation. Once the physical attack ended, Kevani Hicks did something that would seal her fate and end another person's life. She pulled out a gun and started shooting at her manager. The question that immediately arises, and the question that will ultimately determine whether Cavani Hicks walks free or spends the rest of her life in prison, is this. Was she still in imminent danger when she fired those shots, or had the threat already passed? This is the critical distinction that separates legitimate self-defense from second-degree murder in the eyes of the law. And it's a distinction that can be incredibly difficult to make, especially in the heat of a violent confrontation, where adrenaline is pumping, fear is overwhelming every rational thought, and split-second decisions have permanent consequences. From Cavani Hicks's perspective, she told police that she was in fear of her life, and given what had just happened to her, being thrown to the ground and beaten by two men, that fear seems entirely reasonable and justified. Nobody who hasn't experienced that kind of physical assault and terror can truly understand what was going through her mind in those moments. The primal instinct to survive, to fight back, to ensure that your attackers can't hurt you again, these are deeply human responses to violence and threats. But there's another detail that makes Hicks's claim of self-defense even more compelling and demonstrates just how threatened she felt in that moment.
When Ms. Hicks meets with the officer, she indicates that the alleged victim told her that "I'll kill you in one hit," which would obviously make anyone afraid for their life.
For any reasonable person, hearing those words while being beaten would absolutely create a genuine and immediate fear of death or serious bodily harm. This wasn't some vague threat made in anger from across the room. This was a direct promise of lethal violence being made by someone who was actively demonstrating their willingness and ability to hurt her. In that context, Cavani Hicks's decision to arm herself and fire at her attacker seems like a desperate act of self-preservation rather than a calculated act of murder. However, and this is the crucial detail that has led to her being charged with second-degree murder despite the undeniable fact that she was violently assaulted moments before she fired her weapon, the timing of when she fired those shots matters tremendously under the law. According to the investigation and the legal analysis of the case, the critical factor is that her manager was reportedly retreating at the point when she started firing at him. This detail, as minor as it may seem to someone who has just been violently assaulted and threatened with death, is what transforms an act of self-defense into an act of criminal homicide in the eyes of the law.
This is a case that if she had shot him when he was beating her, she probably could have been justified, but the fact that he was retreating at the point that she started firing at him, it becomes where she committed the offense that she's being charged with.
This legal distinction is absolutely critical to understanding why Cavani Hicks is facing such serious charges despite the undeniable fact that she was violently assaulted moments before she fired her weapon. Under Florida's self-defense laws, which include the controversial stand your ground provision, a person is justified in using deadly force if they reasonably believe that such force is necessary to prevent imminent death or great bodily harm to themselves or others. The keyword here is imminent. The threat must be happening right now or be about to happen immediately. Once an attacker retreats or withdraws from the confrontation, the legal justification for using deadly force typically ends because the imminent threat is no longer present. The attacker is leaving, the danger is passing, and any use of force at that point is no longer defensive. It becomes retaliatory or offensive. But here's the problem with applying this clean legal standard to a messy, violent, terrifying real-world situation. Human beings don't process trauma and fear according to neat legal categories. When you've just been thrown to the ground, beaten by two men, and threatened with death, your brain doesn't instantly shift from survival mode to calm legal analysis the moment your attackers start to back away. The fear doesn't disappear, the adrenaline doesn't stop pumping. The belief that you're still in danger doesn't evaporate just because someone takes a step backward. Research into the psychology of violent encounters and trauma responses shows that people who have just experienced a violent attack often continue to perceive threat even after the immediate danger has passed. Their bodies are flooded with stress hormones, their fight or flight response is in full activation, and their ability to rationally assess whether a threat has ended is severely compromised. In that state, the line between defense and retaliation can become almost impossible to identify. None of these excuses the fact that a man is now dead. Cavani Hicks's manager was shot and later died at the hospital from his injuries. A life has been lost, a family is grieving, and no legal analysis or psychological explanation can bring him back or undo that tragedy. But it does raise profound questions about how we judge people who make split-second decisions under extreme duress, and whether our legal system adequately accounts for the reality of how human beings actually respond to violence and terror. Adding another complex layer to this already chaotic situation, Cavani Hicks was also hit by the white Lexus as the driver took off from the scene. So not only was she beaten and threatened with death, but she was also struck by a vehicle as one of her attackers fled. This detail is significant because it shows that even after the shooting, the violence against her continued, reinforcing her perception that she was under attack and in danger. The judge in the preliminary hearing found probable cause to proceed with the second-degree murder charge, which is a significant hurdle that shows the court believes there is sufficient evidence to suggest that Cavani Hicks may have committed a crime. However, finding probable cause at a preliminary hearing is a much lower bar than proving guilt beyond a reasonable doubt at trial, and it doesn't mean the ultimate outcome of this case is predetermined. The defense will have the opportunity to present evidence of the assault she suffered, the death threats she received, her state of mind, and all the factors that led her to believe she needed to use deadly force to protect herself. Currently, Cavani Hicks is being held without bond, which means she's sitting in jail awaiting trial with no option to post bail and secure her release. This decision by the court reflects the seriousness of the charge and potentially the judge's assessment of flight risk or danger to the community, though without bond decisions in murder cases are not uncommon, regardless of the circumstances. For Cavani, this means that every day she spends waiting for her case to move through the notoriously slow criminal justice system is a day spent behind bars, away from her family, her music, and her life.
But the story doesn't end with just Cavani Hicks facing consequences for what happened that night. Police are still actively searching for the driver of the white Lexus to get their side of what happened and potentially bring charges against them as well. This person, who, according to the evidence, was the first to physically assault Cavani Hicks by hitting her and throwing her to the ground, fled the scene after hitting her with the vehicle and has not yet been held accountable for their role in this tragedy. The fact that this person remains at large raises important questions about justice and accountability in this case. If Cavani Hicks is being held responsible for her actions in the aftermath of being attacked, shouldn't the person who initiated the physical violence also face consequences? Shouldn't the person who struck her with a vehicle while fleeing be held accountable? The search for this individual is crucial, not just for completing the investigation, but for ensuring that all parties who contributed to this deadly confrontation face appropriate legal scrutiny. We still don't know the full story of what led to the argument that night. What could have sparked such intense anger that it escalated to physical violence? Was it a dispute over money, creative control, contracts, or personal issues that spilled over into their professional relationship? The answers to these questions may never be fully known, but they're important for understanding the complete context of what happened that night. Let me know what you think in the comment section.
And when the haters start hating on you, just laugh at them all the way to college and get your education on. Bachelor's degree me, please.
I thought niggas was been dead. I thought niggas was been dead. Thought niggas was... Look, I thought niggas was been dead cause they sleeping on me. Watch out the boss lay hand down when you say no, they start reaching on me. We all sinners, so I never judge a bum nigga when you start preaching on me. But it stop there cause if you get involved with a bum, then you start leeching on me. That's up. Look, now I gotta show them that I get mine, call me a bitch cause I put a dog nigga down. You think I was brutalized, and I never play signs, I neutralize. And I let the point up, it's illuminized. And I smoke that smoke, I'm a juvenile. time, nigga better get in line. And I answer you when I get the crown. I'm gonna call you calling line. Money calling. Yes, God sent me a dollar sign. I be scared, call, but they told me to act like Columbine. So I call a vibe and I turn up. You don't want smoke, so you burnt up. I'm flying high to the surface. And the earth shaking like it's nervous. It's purpose, nigga. Don't believe it's on the surface, son. Don't believe it's on the surface, son. Earth shaking like it's nervous, oh yeah. Don't believe it's on the surface. Miami, keep it 305.
The trial, whenever it occurs, will be closely watched not just by the Miami music community, but by anyone interested in self-defense law, women's rights, and the question of how far someone can go to protect themselves when they genuinely believe their life is in danger. The prosecution will argue that Cavani Hicks crossed the line from victim to perpetrator when she fired at her manager as he was retreating, transforming an act of self-defense into an act of murder. The defense will counter that she was a terrified woman who had just been beaten and threatened with death, who had every reason to believe she was still in mortal danger, and who acted out of genuine fear for her survival. For Cavani Hicks, whose music career was just beginning and whose life stretched out before her with endless possibilities, that Monday morning near Wynwood Walls will define everything that comes after. Whether she ultimately walks free or spends decades behind bars, the events of that night have forever altered the trajectory of her life and taken away someone else's life entirely. And for all of us watching this case unfold, it forces us to confront uncomfortable questions about violence, self-defense, justice, and what we would do if we found ourselves in a similar situation where we had to choose between fighting back and potentially losing our lives. Click on one of the cards on your screen to see more videos like this.